telling the user, so the user's normal keyboard commands may not be available. So these are things to check for and make sure that they are still available. We encourage good form markup, and actually within Drupal, if you're using the Form API to build your module, there's already perfectly good form markup associating labels with fields, encouraging the use of field sets and legends, and pretty good validation errors are given so that if somebody does that form wrong, they know pretty instantly where the problem is and exactly what that problem is. And finally, for rich content, we have a few ways of encouraging creation of rich content. We explain the principles of it, how with audio you need to have text, a text version of that audio available. People need to be able to turn off and turn on audio, and if possible, should not autoplay. This is for people who are screen reader users who may go to a site and music starts playing automatically and they can't hear the screen reader. They need to be able to turn off the music pretty quickly. And the same goes for video that autoplays. In synchronized media, you can have captions or you can have a descriptive audio track. Captions are a little more widely supported. YouTube actually supports, in November of last year, rolled out a beta version of automated captioning, which isn't perfect yet, but it's pretty interesting. And in terms of what you can do, there's the media module, which is pledged Drupal 7 compliance, but is already fully operational for Drupal 6. The media module allows the user to associate fields with any type of content. So what that means is you can have the option to, when you upload a video, associate a transcript with that video. You can also associate a selectable audio track. And it also includes plugins for remote video hosting, so you can associate a YouTube video. So you can upload your video to YouTube and get captioning, then associate it with the media module, and you've got media on the page that's accessible. Another good module is the Swift Tools module, which is already fully operational for Drupal 6, and it comes with very good stop-start controls and interior volume control. So that's pretty cool. And okay, here we go. So a couple of other things that we do is when we test for accessibility, we test for actionable usability, not user interface design. So in other words, we're not worried about how intuitive an interface is to the average user. When we're testing for accessibility, we're testing to find out what exactly is, what if any problems there are for accessibility that we can't find on our own. We use screen readers. NVDA is a Microsoft open source screen reader, which is completely free, and many screen reader users use this. I also use Thunder, which is an open source screen reader, and very easy to install. And I use those for a lot of long-term debugging on sites. You can download JAWS, which is the most used screen reader out there, and debug with that. If you do not have a license, you get the demo version, and the demo version lasts 40 minutes. At which time, if you simply reboot your system, you'll get another 40 minutes. So it can be a little time-consuming if you're on a Windows machine, but a good way to go. Yeah. The way that I tend to go is I tend to use one of the free ones to do my long-term debugging, and then when I just want to make absolutely certain everything looks good in the commercial screen reader, then I run through with JAWS, making note of what the problems are, and kind of going through that way. And sometimes just gotta bite the bullet and keep restarting the machine. We also try to test with users. I have a few videos of users with testing Drupal 7 with various assistive technologies, and this is just a good way to keep in mind that making things accessible is less about guidelines and more about the user experience, because something that meets guidelines may still be inaccessible to a user based on their particular situation. And so the way to sort of understand the best way to implement these things is just to go out in the field and see how users with disabilities use the web. And finally, we preach graceful degradation testing. So what you do after you created your website is first you turn off Flash and everything else that implies, like Silverlight and all the fancy technologies that you're pretty sure you got to download all kinds of plugins to play with. Then you turn off JavaScript in your browser. And this is not because most assistive technology users do not have JavaScript. In fact, most assistive technology users actually do have it. This is because while it may be turned on in many situations for JavaScript content, the user will miss certain things about it, particularly if it's a dynamically refreshing display or something like that. And then you turn off images. This is a good way to check for alt text and make sure that everything has alt text that should, and anything that doesn't really need alt text doesn't have anything. And finally, we remove the CSS. And we remove the CSS to make sure that the content the data of the content is all there, and that the content and presentation are separated. So in other words, somebody can look at all the content on the site and there's not something that's in the CSS or a color only sheet that they would maybe not be able to perceive that conveys information that they can't otherwise get. And last but not least, you use the keyboard. And what you do is you actually unplug your mouse and you try to tab through the website using the tab keys, the arrow keys, the escape keys. And if you can get through your whole website and get to all the controls and operate it without breaking a sweat, that's really good. It almost never happens on the first try. So definitely don't get frustrated if it basically completely breaks your site if you do this a couple times. But if you can get through all of this and your site is still, all the content is still there and reasonably operable, then you're really pretty good. Finally, a few more accessibility testing tools that are out there. Again, I mentioned VisCheck. There is the Firefox accessibility extension, which basically checks and evaluates the page for various pieces of assistive code and markup, like checking for alt text, checking for headings, checking for proper heading hierarchy, etc. There's the Fangs plugin for Firefox, or I'm sorry, the Fangs extension for Firefox, which basically will give you a text version of what JAWS would speak of any given page, so that can be pretty handy as well. And finally, there's some HTML validators, the W3C HTML and CSS validators. You want to make sure, obviously, that all of your HTML is valid in any given case, but particularly for accessibility, valid HTML and CSS is really important. There's the Wave evaluator, which is put out by Webbing, and that's actually an accessibility evaluator, and that's a pretty good evaluator for the type of markup that sort of things like the Firefox accessibility extension checks for. So it checks that, for instance, alt text is put. Doesn't necessarily check that the alt text is appropriate or that the image actually needs alt text versus an empty alt tag. So this is a good way to just search for the low-hanging fruit, but then you really should also still go over your pages and make sure that everything is pleasing to you and makes sense to the user. And I think that's it for me.
So I have a question first before anybody else does. Could you talk to about how accessible Drupal 6 is kind of out of the box right now and how close we're getting to real accessibility in Drupal 7?
Well, out of the box, Drupal 6 is pretty accessible. The install is still a little bit of a problem for a person using a screen reader or an assistive technology to get through. Drupal 7's install process is much easier in terms of that. There's a lot of use of ARIA scripting, or the ARIA tool like aspects. So, for instance, the progress bar, I think 35% done when you're installing Drupal. That actually has ARIA attached to it. So Screener will now read 34% done, 36% done, 50% done. Whereas in Drupal 6 that doesn't happen. In terms of just creating content and going through a web page, Drupal 6 is already pretty accessible because it's the HTML that it spits out on its own by nature is very valid. And it's relatively straightforward, a series of links, and pretty well understandable and operable tools. So out of the box, it's pretty accessible.
And how about Drupal 7? A lot of people are interested in moving that way.
Well, yeah, Drupal 7 is actually looking even better than Drupal 6. So some of the usability problems there were for accessibility are basically going away in Drupal 7. And there are a few new usability tweaks that we're trying to work out an accessible solution around, but there's already a lot where they're working ARIA into the interface. So basically that reports to screen readers and other assistive technologies when various things on the site change, and they tell an assistive technology more about a page. You can define ARIA regions, such as here's my navigation controls, here's my content, here's my sidebars. And so they're rolling a lot of that into 7, and more than that, particularly at DrupalCon this year, there was a real groundswell of interest in accessibility. So all those of us who are already practicing in accessibility kind of hooked the people who are bigger and cooler and stuff and made them aware of how important accessibility is. And it's a pretty real thought that we could have an entirely accessible CMS. That's release, which would be awesome. Yeah.
Anybody else before?
Do you test the different modules and do you write them like a little report on it, like this module is accessible or this has this and this issues?
If there are very